My grandfather never talked much about the war, except for one story. He said it wasn't the enemy that scared him, but what waited for them back home. October 1918, Hudson River Valley. His unit was guarding a bridge when the fog came in thick, and they started hearing hoofbeats where no horse should have been. He always said there was nobody out there, but I don't think he believed it. So before we continue, please make sure to like and subscribe to support the channel, and comment down below where you're watching from. Thanks. I tell this the way my grandfather told me, with the stove popping and the coffee burnt, and the wind pressing the door. No polish, no coat of paint. It was October of 1918. The leaves were orange and wet like old flags. We were back on home soil, but not home. Our little detachment had orders to guard a supply bridge near Sleepy Hollow, Hudson River Valley, New York. The old bones of stories in the dirt there. You know the one, the rider, the missing head. The town never really lets you forget it. They put me in charge of the night watch because I kept my head, Corporal James Harlow. I was steady then, rational. That is what they said. True enough. Months in Europe had trained fear into a thing you could fold and pocket. By October, everyone said the big war was ending soon. They said it with tired mouths. The real trick was making your hands stop shaking. The shaking still came from time to time. When the fog lifted, you'd see it. A tremor that lived underneath everything like bad wiring. Our post sat a half-mile from the river. A short iron truss bridge crossed the creek that fed into it. A track ran nearby. You could hear trains whining at night. One town away, the whistle moving like a blade through the fog. The bridge mattered because trucks came over with crates bound for the dock. Flour, wire, tools. A few crates nobody asked about. We were told to stop looters and saboteurs and board boys with more whiskey than sense. Easy duty, they said. Keep the lamp lit. Keep the posts dry. Rotate fire watch. File a report every morning. If anything looked off, ring the bell by the bridge and stand to. Sergeant Milton Graves ran us like a clock. Tall, narrow as a fence post. A jaw that looked carved. He had the steady voice men follow. Not warm, not cruel. He traded in habits. Up before dawn. Boots lined, rifle clean. With him, you felt like there was a line on the ground and you knew where it was. He did not like ghosts. He did not like excuses. He did not like the word maybe. Private Collins was the youngest. A farm kid from Pennsylvania. Hair the color of straw that had sat one winter too long. Hands that didn't fit his sleeves. He believed old stories the way some men believe in prayer. A little bit, then all at once. He kept a Catholic medal under his shirt and fingered it when the mist got thick. He could shoot but flinched at thunder. The way he said "sir" made you want to send him home before the world taught him its worst. Private Evans had the medic bag, calm voice. Good at slow breathing. He had done too much of that overseas. He'd seen what artillery does when a man is close to it. Even back here, he walked like the ground might shift. His eyes would get thin and then glassy for a second, like he'd step back into a place the rest of us couldn't see. Private Torres said little, wrote much. Every night he scrawled in a little journal with frayed corners. He said it kept the dark from doubling up. You look at him and think he wasn't seeing anything. Then later he'd hand you 3 sentences that cut to bone. He wasn't a poet. He was a mirror. He noticed things the rest of us walked past. We set up camp on a flat piece of dirt above the creek, canvas tents, a fire ring of river stones, a crate table for cards. We had canned meat, hard biscuits, coffee that tasted like a boot heel. Nights were quiet. Too quiet if you ask me now. Quiet in a way that made you remember the noise of shells and scream at the silence for what it did to your head. On the line you learned to sleep in bursts and wake in a world on fire. Here you lay down and heard only breath and the slow creep of fog coming off water. It pushed between trees and across your ankles. It carried the cold in its mouth. We kept the lanterns covered. We checked the posts. The iron bridge clanked when a cart rolled over, the sound traveling under your boots. Sometimes a train would moan up the valley at midnight, then again before dawn, only a voice and no body. The river made its own weather. Fog formed fast and stayed low all day like a cat watching you. Even in sunlight, the air had weight. Smoke from the cook fire didn't climb. It just hung there and then soaked into your clothes. October does that by the water. Thick, damp, the kind of cold that sneaks through wool. We played cards. We took long turns sharpening knives that didn't need it. Graves had us clean the rifle rack twice as often as we needed. He said idle hands breed trouble, and he wasn't wrong. Trouble likes a quiet room. I was 26. My knees hurt when the rain was close. My right ear still rang from a shell that landed close enough to smear the world, but I still believed in most of the simple things that keep a man from drifting. Orders, firelight, a steady voice, a good pair of boots. If there were ghosts, they belonged to the old stories, not to me. That was the normal. It didn't stay. The locals liked to talk. They came by with apples and bread, and we traded coffee and tins of salmon. Old men with hands full of river years. They'd spit to the side and nod toward the trees and say, "Be careful with that fog at night. It carries more than cold." A woman from the village brought us a pumpkin and a loaf and told Collins to quit walking the bridge alone at dusk. She said the rider lost his head in the war before yours, and it still looks for it when autumn comes. She said it like she was reciting weather. True, the way weather is true. Collins swallowed hard and said, "Yes, ma'am," and held the bread like a baby. I laughed about it by the fire, made a show of rolling my eyes. I said the only riders I'd worry about were the ones made of flesh and bone with a bottle in their coat and an idea about our crates. Graves grunted and said, "See that, man? The corporal knows a story when he hears one." Then he told us to knock off at 2200 and watch our sectors. But the stories hang on the ribs. You pretend they don't. Then you lay down and the river breathes, and the wind finds the leaves, and you hear old boots cross a bridge that isn't there. Somewhere, a dog barked once, then didn't again. The first time we heard the hoofbeats was 3 nights after the pumpkin came. It was late. The fog sat knee-high and would have taken your belt if fog could. I was awake. You couldn't really sleep when everything beneath the trees went soft like that. Sound didn't travel right. It came and went and came again, each time from a different place. You'd step and there'd be water where there wasn't before. You'd blink and swear the fire moved. We were on watch, me and Collins. He had that farm boy uprightness, but the dark digs elbows into boys like him. We stood by the bridge lamp, trimmed low. The creek moved under us like a thought you can't hold. Hoofbeats. Close. Slow. Slow. A steady clop clop, not a run. It came from down along the road that hugged the creek. We both froze and looked, but the fog made a wall, and then another wall behind it. The sound came clean, then smudged, then clean again, like someone hammering at the far end of a tunnel. Collins gripped his rifle and pressed the metal through his shirt. "Rider?" he whispered. "Probably a farm horse," I said. "Someone cut across the road." "There aren't any farms that way," he said. "Only the river." He was right about that. I didn't say it. Morning light does what men can't. It pulled the fog apart and showed the mud along the road. Hoof prints, deep ones. Single animal, fresh. No iron shoe pattern you'd see in town. A big horse, the kind that pulls and doesn't spook. The prints ran along the road toward the river. Then the ground turned to reeds and river stones, and the prints stopped. Stopped cold. Nothing in the reeds, nothing at the water's edge. No marks on the stones, just a hard stop like a sentence cut short. We told Graves. He listened, jaw set, eyes flat. He said tracks stop when the ground changes. He said sound carries weird in fog. He said men hear hoofbeats when someone is dragging a cart downriver. He said we were guarding a bridge, not chasing old wives. Then he told us to stop jumping at shadows and clean the lantern brackets. That afternoon, someone put a pumpkin on the bridge rail. Big one, orange as a flare. It hadn't been there in the morning. No one in camp owned it. No locals came up the path that day. We left it. When we came back at dawn after the night watch, it was smashed on the road like a thrown head. Stringy and wet and stinking sweet. The pulp stuck to the iron like blood would. We didn't say much. We scraped it off with a mess knife and tried to laugh. The laugh stuck too. A fog bank walked up the creek early each evening after that. So early you'd think the sun had been blown out. Even when the days were clear and bright as coins, by late afternoon the mist was already licking the grass. Torres wrote in his little book. I asked him once what he was scribbling. He said, "It's like the air's listening." He smiled without teeth and put the book away. The night it turned, I had the South Watch with Collins. We were both tired. The clear days fooled you, but the nights took their tax. I tried to talk about anything that wasn't fog or hoofbeats or river. We talked about pies. We talked about trains. We got as far as the smell of wheat dust in summer before the wind stiffened and the lamp shook in its hood, and the creek made that sound it makes when cold drops into it and changes its voice. Clop, 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 clop. Not the echo of a cart, not the ring of iron on steel. Hoofbeats moving out in the throat of the fog, same pace as a heartbeat on a man who's not sure if he's seen someone in his doorway. Collins leaned forward like a hound. Hear that? I hear someone trying to scare us, I said. Hold your post. We kept still. We weren't stupid. You don't leave a post on account of sound. Not unless you want to get men killed by the living, not the dead. But hearing does what it wants to you. It folds your chest and pulls your hands. It crawls under your collar and turns your head before you know you've moved. The hoofbeats got near the road's bend, then stopped. A breath. Then nothing but the slow draw of the tide sucking at river stones. At first light we walked the road with Graves. He didn't say a word. He bent, stood, bent again, checking mud and ruts. Hoofprints again. Deep. One animal. Big. The same round edges. They ran to where the road emptied near river grass. Then nothing. Not a slip mark, not a splash. It looked wrong. It looked like the horse had stepped forward and then vanished. You can reason about it any way you like. New mud over old prints. Stones that don't take impressions. A path across the reeds that only looks like a dead end. But that morning, it was a hard stop that made the throat feel dry. Someone's playing us, I said. Graves stood, wiped his hands. Someone thinks they are, which is when they get sloppy. Keep watch. Don't give them what they want. Don't feed a trick. That night, Torres woke screaming. We all came out of our tents with rifles half up. He sat, chest heaving, palms flat on his knees like he'd been bracing for an impact only he felt. I saw a rider in the fog, he said. He looked annoyed with himself. It was a dream. Evan sat by him, held him a while, slow breath in, slow breath out, like he'd done 1,000 times with boys who saw libraries of things their heads couldn't shelve right. We all pretended to return to sleep. No one slept right after that. Morning turned up a different kind of strange. One of the bracket arms on the bridge lamp was gone. The whole bent piece of iron that held the side lantern. It had been forged to look like a horseshoe. Not fancy, just local ironwork with a little joke in it. Now it was snapped clean at the base and gone. No scraps on the road. No bent piece below. Like someone wanted a souvenir and brought a wrench and time to spare. Graves swore, wrote it up, and made us recheck every bolt on the bridge. He told the depot a town away that we'd had vandals again. They told us to keep our eyes open. Easy order. Hard to obey when the air turns thick enough to hide a man a dozen steps away. If you need a neat reason for the hoofbeats, I can give you one. Downriver, a crew had been moving cargo late, rolling barrels and crates, chain clanking, sound carries. Metal on wood and stone can imitate a lot of things you don't want to hear at night. I know that now. I knew it then. I told Collins that. He nodded. He said, "Sure, Corporal," and he pressed his metal like it could hold a line against fog. The fog took hold and didn't let go. Days move like a bad dream you can't wake from because you never slept to begin with. Cold ate into everything. Even the coffee tasted like blunt metal. Graves doubled the rounds. He said we were being watched. He didn't say by who. He didn't have to. He snapped the day into little segments, and that helped at first. Men like blocks. Build them up, knock them down. Do it again. The body likes knowing what comes next, even when the mind is chewing itself. Collins got jumpy. His eyes had the glassy shine you see on deer at the edge of the field when the dogs push the line. He started to say the fog smelled like gunpowder and smoke one afternoon. He said it soft like he expected me to laugh. I didn't. I bought a minute and told him a story about a mule we had in France that used to chew on mess tins. He laughed a little too loud and then swallowed it and went quiet. He looked at the river and it looked back. Evans dug a little brass button out of the dirt near the post one morning. He was poking around while the coffee beat back the frost. He held it up, round. Green with time, he rubbed it with his thumb. A crown cipher under the green, Hessian. revolutionary. He said it didn't mean a thing. He said this valley was a graveyard of uniforms. He put the button in his pocket like a rabbit's foot he didn't want to admit he wanted. Right before dark that day, across the river, a shadow moved where no shadow belonged. A mounted shape, tall, holding still among trees that weren't tall enough to hide it. It stood out against the pale. I caught it sideways through the trees. Once, twice. Then it wasn't there anymore. A trick of light. A man can see what he wants to see when he is tired, and even what he doesn't want. I told the men it was the watchfire's glow catching smoke and branches. Colin stared at the spot until his eyes watered. He said, "You saw it." I didn't answer. Arguments start small. About the coffee being too thin. About who forgot to bank the fire. About who left a coat on the bridge when the wind came up and nearly took it. Then they grow teeth. Collins wanted to stack more sandbags on the far end of the bridge where the shadow had stood. Graves said no, we would not fortify against a fog bank. Evans said the air wasn't right and he had a buzzing in his ear that meant a storm was close. I told them all to cut it and stick to the board. Graves praised me for that with his eyes and then put me on a second watch that night like a reward that wasn't one. Sleep went thin as paper and then tore. Every noise found our nerves. The owl sounded like a hinge. The river sounded like footsteps. The lamp hissed when you trimmed it and someone flinched. Men can get used to shells. They can love the scream because the scream is honest. It tells you you're alive. Quiet is meaner. Quiet makes you build the rest of the noise in your own head. On the 5th night after the button, the fog never lifted. Not at noon. Not at dusk. It pressed at the tent flaps. It soaked the blankets. It sat in our mouths. We ate in silence. We took turns standing a dozen feet apart and still losing each other. I called out across the bridge and the sound came back wrong, like someone else had used my voice and didn't know me. The storm hit at evening, wind first. Leaves came low across the road like rats. The creek heaved. The first thunder sounded like a train turning and shoving and then coming head on. The bell by the bridge clanged once in a gust and then twice more, not from a hand, but from the air itself. We all looked at each other mid-chew. Graves stood, chair scraping. Harlow, with me. We went for the bridge. Rain stung, slant and thin like thrown nails. The lamp hissed under its hood. We got to the near end and then saw him. A shape on horseback, far end, tall as a man and a half. Still. Silent. The horse's head low like statues of generals. The rider's shoulders wrong. Too square. The lightning answered while we stared. Blue white across water. The rider flashed bright. I saw a glint of metal at the figure's belt, and something swung. A lantern. Broken. Hanging from a strap. It bobbed as the wind shoved. The rider didn't move. The horse didn't move. Only that dead lantern swayed like it was still deciding. Graves cupped his hands and shouted, "You there. This is a military post. Show yourself." Another flash. The figure still as a nailed door. The rain hit harder. The creek bellowed. Graves raised his rifle, fired a warning shot into the mud at the figure's feet. The sound rolled down river and came back in pieces. The horse jerked. Or the shadow jerked. It bolted. It went left, into fog, not away down the road, but cut sharp like a thing that could slip sideways. Then it was gone. The far end of the bridge stood empty. The lamp on our end made the rain look like wires. We crossed. We found nothing you could hang a fact on. No horse marks deep as we'd seen before. The rain had torn the ground to soup, so it had an excuse. We found weeds along the bank caught in a twist of wire. Inside the tangle, half buried, lay a helmet. Not a new helmet, the rim dented. Iron, heavier than common sense. Not American. Not the kind we wore in France. The shape was old. I picked it up and mud water bled out of the edges like the thing had lungs. Colin said a word I won't repeat and stepped back from it. I told myself and anyone who would listen that it was a trespasser, a looter, a man trying to slip under guard through the fog to get at whatever he thought our crates held. He had a horse and a lantern that had gone bad, and he was dumb enough to stand on the far side when the storm pressed the world down around him. Graves listened but said nothing. He turned the helmet in his hands. He watched the far bank like it might reveal the trick if you stared long enough. We brought the helmet back to camp and set it on the crate table like a wet animal. The rain slowed after midnight. The thunder walked away into the next county. We heated coffee, and the steam climbed in a brave little column you didn't trust. Graves checked the bridge twice more on his own, then once more near dawn. He didn't wake me for that last one. He didn't come back. We found it only because the sun tried and failed to push through. And in that gray light, sticks look like rifles until you get close enough to see they are only sticks. But this wasn't a stick. It was his rifle. Half buried in the mud near the river bend, stock smeared, barrel clogged. No footprints that still made sense after the storm. No sign of a fall that would have dragged and torn. Just the rifle, and the idea of a man who had been holding it because he couldn't imagine not holding it, and then at some point there was no man. There are rules for what to do when your sergeant doesn't come back. You lock down the post. You double the watch. You send a man to the nearest telephone line to alert the depot and ask for a search party at first light. You don't run in circles. You don't break up. You don't chase shapes. You keep your back to a tree and your eyes on the bridge, and you take the orders the dead man would have given if he were here to give them. We tried. We really did. Evans kept saying the ringing in his ear got louder. He said that was a storm sign, but the storm had already gone. Colin started hearing hoofbeats in every break of brush. "They're circling us," he said once. Not the enemy, not men. He didn't say it, but his eyes did. Torres wrote and wrote, and the sound of the pencil on paper began to feel like a man whispering in the next tent. He stayed quiet, but his hands shook when he put the book away. The fog didn't clear for 2 days. Not fully. Even at noon, the light was sour. It took the green out of things. The trees stood like soldiers punished on parade. The creek ran with a new sound I didn't like it had swallowed something heavy and was trying to dissolve it. We found Graves's canteen hung on a low branch. It swung in the wet like a pendulum, slow, with a patient rhythm, as if someone had set it there and told it to mark time. That's when rational got hard. I kept telling myself, men make mistakes when they are tired and proud. He'd gone down the bank to check the supports. He'd slipped and lost his rifle. He'd fallen into water and either climbed out somewhere else or gotten pulled under and away. But the creek there wasn't deep enough to take a man in daylight without a fight. The river beyond could, sure. But you'd see drag marks. You'd see something more than an empty hand of mud in a swinging canteen. Night came again like a bully you owed money to. The lamp hissed like it didn't want the job. The bell by the bridge made a single sound at dusk without help. The note hung in the fog longer than it ought to, like everything else that week. Torres wrote his last entry that evening. I didn't read it then. I read it years later when it came back to me in an envelope with a brittle smell. But I remember the look on his face as he closed the little book and slid it into the inner pocket of his jacket. Calm, like a man who has said his piece and is ready for whatever the river has left to say. He rides when soldiers return from war, he said to no one in particular, as if he'd run out of paper and had only air left to write on. Collins lost his nerve after midnight. He had that hollow look men get before they run. The metal in his shirt had polished a spot on his chest. He said he heard a horse. He said it soft at first and then louder. He took 2 steps toward the road and told me he would just take a look, only a look, he wouldn't go far. I told him no. I told him he'd stay on post, and if he loved his mother, he'd obey a simple order. He nodded like he agreed. Then the bell clanged once more in a gust and he was gone into the fog like a fish taking the bait you dangled, only to see what would happen. "Collins!" I yelled. My voice fell flat at 10 paces. I did not chase. That was the one smart thing I did that night. Evans grabbed my sleeve and shook his head. "He'll come back. If we run, we lose the post." He didn't come back. He screamed once. A man knows all the different screams by then. This was not shell, not fire, not blood. It was air going out of someone fast, while shock drew the voice tight. Then, nothing. We held the bridge, and the bridge held us. For a while, dawn tried and failed. The fog had grown a spine. It stood and moved and wedged itself between trees, and you couldn't tell if you were in it or it was in you. We went searching anyway because the not searching would kill us faster. I took Evans. I left Torres on the near end of the bridge with orders to ring the bell if he saw any shape that wasn't us. We marked our way with strips torn from a flour sack so we could find back to the road. It felt like a city block between each tree. We found the place where Collins fell. The bridge rail on the far end was slick. The boards sloped raw from age and weather. In fog like that, a boy could think he saw a lane where there wasn't one and step it and find air instead. He had fallen from the side. He had hit a rock edge bad with his neck. He lay in the reeds at an angle a body doesn't choose. His eyes were open and saw nothing. His rifle lay 3 feet away like he'd tried to grab it at the last second. Evans swallowed and put his hand to the boy's throat, a habit that isn't needed when your eyes tell you the truth for free. He kept his hand there anyway. He had to use his training or he'd be left with only his hands and his grief. Neck, he said, broken. He didn't drown. I stood there and listened to the river suck and spit. I looked at the boards of the bridge, the worn places where feet had gone. I tried to assemble a scene that didn't require horsemen or legends. It wasn't hard. A scream in fog. A boy chasing a shadow that was only his fear standing 2 steps ahead. A boot slip. A missed handhold. Gravity. The kindest killer. I felt a hot shame that tasted like iron. I had not tackled him. I had not tied him to a post if I had to. The duty was the bridge, sure, but the duty was also the boy. You learn the wrong lesson often in a war, and it takes the exact payment. Evans breathed fast. His face went pale. He looked upriver, then down, then back at me like I could fix the air. He said the ringing in his ear had turned to a throb. He said it sounded like hooves far off. He said it 3 times, the last time like it was a prayer. Steady, I said. We bring him back. We call for help. We hold. He nodded, and then his eyes went wide like he'd seen a flare from the corner. He bolted into fog on the far side without a word. I grabbed for him and got coat and lost it. Evans, I yelled. Hold. He vanished. The fog took him like it had been waiting for him by name. His footfalls pounded twice. Then a branch cracked somewhere that didn't make sense with his run. Then the ringing in my own ear climbed and then dove, like a horn cutting the air and not touching it. Then nothing. I could have chased. I did not. I had one job now. 2 bodies in fog with no rope back to the bridge equals 3 gone men. I lay Collins on a poncho. I covered his face. I took his dog tag and slid it into my pocket. I stood, rifle up, breathing slow, every sense straining with stupid hope. The quiet came around me piece by piece like an ambush that doesn't need guns. A tree creaked like a saddle leather pulled too hard. The lamp at the near end of the bridge swung in some gentler breeze that didn't reach here and made a shadow move across the boards. And then there he was, a mounted figure, 30 paces off in the trees where the fog thinned in slices, tall, still. The horse, a black pillar. The rider, a dark shape with shoulders wider than they ought to be. No head, no face, just a block of night where the neck should rise. The lantern at the figure's waist swayed once like the one we'd seen. Something in me that had been steady for years went soft. My feet tried to turn. My hands did not. They brought the rifle up and found the sights. The wind hissed through grass like a whisper. The figure didn't move. It stood like a dare. I fired. The shot went into the trees and came out of them thinner and unsure. The figure jerked. It fell, not like a man falling off a horse, but like a boar getting pushed by a sudden hand. It crashed, and then there was no horse, only fog, and the breath in my lungs got stuck halfway down and nowhere to go. I ran to the spot with a steadiness I don't remember choosing. I found a broken post, a length of fence that had been loosened by the storm and dragged at an angle by wind and water. A loop of wire hung from it with a rusted lamp frame knocked from the bracket on our bridge. The wire had caught on a root and made the post stand nearly upright in a place where the ground stepped down into reed and ditch. The lamp frame had a shard of glass left in it. A trick of light and angle had put the shard at the exact place where a head might be and then not. The broken board had looked like a horse's chest. The rest you can blame on a brain that knew exactly what pictures it had stored. I stood there with the rifle and felt the stupid wash over me like a second rain. The post swayed. The lantern frame clicked against the wood in the little breeze. Clack. It sounded like a bit in a horse's mouth if you wanted it to. I looked down and saw marks where someone had pulled the post up from another place, not far. The storm or a man. Someone had dragged it across the ground and let it stand here, wedged in the mud by chance or joke. Maybe that was our rider's trick. Maybe it wasn't anyone's trick at all. The trouble is that a neat answer doesn't fold time back. It doesn't make your men walk out of fog smiling and tired and complaining about how the coffee is never strong enough. It doesn't give a sergeant back his rifle. It doesn't scrub a boy's neck of the angle you don't want to remember. I stood a long time. Then I did the work. I went back for Torres. He wasn't at the bridge. They found me a day later, the depot boys, with 2 local men and a mule cart and 3 lanterns. I was on the near side of the bridge, sitting back to the post. My hands had gone white and had no feeling left. The fog had lifted some. The wind had turned. The sun looked at us like it wasn't sure we belonged to it. I had no memory of that last night, not past the post and the broken lamp and the shape that wasn't a shape. That is what I told them. They believed me because it was simpler than the other versions. We pulled Collins from the reeds and laid him in the cart on a canvas. We took care with his hands. We marked the place on the bridge rail where the boards had slicked with age. We wrote it down like it was law. We searched both banks for graves. Nothing. We searched the far paths for Evans. We found a scrap of his coat by a thorn. We found nothing else that loved his name. We followed scuffed marks where the storm had dragged fence boards and tree limbs and hung them on roots in ways that made them stand like soldiers for a breath and then fall again. We found the iron helmet where I'd left it, dull now. The rain dried to a film. We sent it with the cart because that is what men do when they don't know if an object is a clue or only a weight. The report wrote itself. Disorientation due to fog, exhaustion, and poor visibility. Possible misadventure during inclement weather. Sergeant presumed missing in action. Domestic incident believed drowned. Medic missing. Search ongoing. Private Collins, deceased due to fall from bridge, neck fracture, no signs of foul play. The language of men trying not to say what they were afraid they'd say if they let themselves use the words they wanted. The officer at the depot signed it in a neat hand. He did not look up when he told me to get some rest. We packed camp in a slow fog that only lived in us now, not in the air. Torres's tent held his journal under his rolled wool. I didn't open it then. I put it in my pack. We crossed the bridge one last time and the boards didn't complain. They just held us as we went, like a good bridge does no matter what it has had to see. The locals nodded when they heard. They said it soft. They said that soldiers had seen the Horseman again and that he waits for men home from war when the leaves turn. They brought a pie we didn't have appetite for and left it anyway. Men in caps at the depot crossed themselves when we said we'd lost 2 to fog. You can lose 10 to shells and no one will blink. You lose 2 to fog and they know the story that owns this land has put a hand on your shoulder. Years later, someone came around and asked me about it. A writer with a notebook and the smile of a man who wants your story to be a different shape than it is. He asked about the rider. He asked about the missing head. He asked if the pumpkin meant anything. He asked like he wanted the world to hook together in one satisfying click. I told him the truth, the only way I know it. There was no ghost, I said. I said it quiet because saying it loud would have felt like a dare. But something was out there. Maybe it was just us. I opened Torres's journal that winter when the house was too quiet. There were pages about coffee and fog and the way the bridge sounded like a tongue hitting teeth when the wind blew just so. There was a line near the end, written clean, the pencil not yet worn, the words like hardware you could hold, legends feed on fear. He didn't mean it as poetry. He meant it as inventory, a ledger entry. The sort of sentence that can get a man killed if he isn't careful with it. I keep the helmet in my shed now. It sits on a shelf with old tools and a coil of rope. Some days I think it's a joke played by time. Some days I think a man with a horse and a bad lantern tried his luck that week and paid for it somewhere downriver with a broken leg and then a slow crawl and then a cold end. Some days I think about fence posts that stand up where they shouldn't and lantern frames that catch just enough light to make your head fill in the wrong blanks. Most days I don't think about it at all. But when October comes wet and the fog steps up from the river like a soldier reporting for duty, I hear, just for a second, that clack of wire against wood. I smell wet iron. I feel the bridge under my boots. I tell myself again what I told the writer. There was no ghost. There was weather, there was fatigue, there was the mind, which is a poor witness when it is cold and alone. And there was a boy whose mother I promised to write to and did. I wrote what truth I could and kept the rest. Not because I wanted to, but because some parts of a night aren't for paper. You can go to that bridge if you want. The creek still talks. The track still cuts the valley like a scar. The fog still comes early in October and sits where it likes as if the land had saved it a seat. If you go, don't go alone. Bring a friend who doesn't believe in anything and watch the way he starts to walk quieter without saying why. Bring a lantern and keep it trimmed low. If you see a shape where no shape should be, aim your eyes 1 inch to the left of it and wait. You'll see the post. You'll see the broken lamp. You'll see the trick. It won't help much. Sometimes I wake to the far-off sound of hooves on a road that isn't there. I lie in the dark and count my breaths and let the sound die. Sunrise comes late in October. It comes anyway. The mind waits until it does. Then it goes back to work, building a day out of pieces, pretending the pieces were always meant to fit. That's all there is. That's all there was. A bridge, a fog, a helmet that belonged to somebody who doesn't care who holds it now. A boy who slipped. A sergeant who likely went under quiet and quick and didn't have time to be brave. A medic who ran when his head filled the path in front of him with something only he could see. And me standing between what I could prove and what I couldn't, telling the story straight, because crooked is how men make myths. If you want it to be ghosts, you'll have them. The valley will hand you as many as you can carry. If you want it to be weather, you'll have that too. The valley has weather to spare. Me, I only have what it did to the men who were mine for a little while. I have the sound of a lantern frame tapping a post. I have a line in a small book, Legends Feed on Fear. And I have a name I still say sometimes when the fog lifts low and the river shows its stones. Graves, Evans, Collins. I say them like a password. The air doesn't answer. It just listens. So that's the end of our video. If you made it this far, make sure to hit like and subscribe. It really helps the channel and it's free. And if you want more terrifying encounters like this one, check out the other videos on screen right now. Thanks for watching and stay safe out there. See you soon.